Originally, Twin Bay announced their permanent name.
Oh, yeah.
So I was thinking of them, I think it's Twin and Twin Bay.
Wow.
Oh,
Well, you know.
good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, January 14th meeting of the Yellow Springs Planning Commission meeting. I'm Frank. I'll be officiating tonight. I'm going to start off by, would you call the roll, please?
Indeed. Doden,
Here.
Paletta,
Here.
McQueen.
Here.
Also present Denise Swinger, Planning and Zoning Administrator, and Jason Norwood is with us from Coolidge Wall.
First thing I'm going to do is just breeze through tonight's agenda. We'll, in a couple of minutes, we'll review the minutes from the last meeting, talk about any communications that we've had. There has been one letter that's come in. Mary Ann, will you have a council report?
Yep.
Yep. Then we'll have a time for citizens' comments about items that are not on the agenda tonight. And we have one public hearing or a conditional use application for a transient guest lodge. And then after that, old business, reviewing subdivision regulations and sandwich board signs. And then talk about new business and agenda planning before adjourning. So that's about it. So let's move on to reviewing the minutes from December 10th, 2019. Everybody have theirs? Any corrections or clarifications needed on page 1? Page 2? Page 3? Or page 4? Okay. Seeing none, I move that we approve the minutes from the Tuesday, December 3rd, or December 10th, 2019 minutes, or meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Good. Okay. Communications, we did receive one letter from, is it Reimers?
Reimers.
Reimers? Yeah. And it is regarding the conditional use application that we'll be talking about later on. So I think we'll just talk about some of the details of that letter when we get down to the conditional use application. And that was it for communications, I believe. Okay, council report.
Yes. Council approved and actually reaffirmed council goals regarding housing at its last meeting. And in general, the housing goals were to build 300 to 500, no, I should back, to support the building of 300 to 500 housing units in 5 to 10 years, 60% rental, 40% home ownership, based on the goals that were suggested by Patrick Bowen. Council also approved Housing Advisory Board goals for the year and on, and I'm going to read those. So those are, one, sorry, I'm getting all these people commenting about the baby's arrival. Complete the draft housing plan as a living document to be included in the updated online comprehensive land use plan. Lead the housing concept design and development of the Glass Farm area, which of course includes more than the Glass Farm, and develop a timeline for the work. 3, ensure that the Glass Farm area housing is informed by council's overall housing goals, in particular related to rental and affordable housing. 4, collaborate with Antioch College, the Yellow Springs Schools, Home Inc., and the Yellow Springs Development Corporation in developing housing to meet community needs. And 5, and this is a new one, support the creation of a stock of permanently affordable housing units through subsidies and other strategies, since the market alone cannot provide housing for moderate and lower income households, critical to the economic, cultural, and educational needs of Yellow Springs. I also want to note that about the comprehensive land use plan update that's happening on September 23rd, and
Oh,
hope
January 23rd.
January
January
23rd. I don't
23rd.
know where September came from. I won't be here, so I'm hoping that some of you guys can be there. At Mills Lawn at 7, I think,
6:30 to 8.
6:30 to 8. Okay, that's all that I have.
All right, we'll move on to citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments about anything that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the public hearing we have a conditional use application for Kim Lemkow, submitted a conditional use application for transient guest lodging at 114 South Walnut Street. So,
Okay, yes.
I'm going to recuse myself,
Oh, right.
and Lisa's going to come up.
Okay. So Kim Lemkow has submitted a conditional use application for a transit guest lodging permit. She has a property at 114 South Walnut Street that actually has a secondary accessory dwelling unit within basically the house. It had formerly been used as an office space. Staff reviewed her application and checked her area in the rear where she has an alley that comes in for possible parking, and found that we didn't have any issues with what she was proposing to do. She also went to Miami Township Fire and Rescue and did get that approval done ahead of time. We do have a letter here of concern regarding a door, and we can probably ask him about that specifically. One of the things that we just got back today, Judy had forwarded that letter on to the chief, fire chief, and the personnel that actually did the inspection, and they said that when they did the inspection, the door opened and closed, so they had no issues with it at that point.
And that was in, looks like December 24th, is that right?
Yes. So staff doesn't have any issue with the application itself, but, we may definitely want to put a condition on there regarding that the applicant needs to take care of the door and possibly have someone verify that the work was done before we issue the permit. A contractor specifically, someone that can say that it resolves the issue of entering and exiting that accessory dwelling.
Questions or comments anybody up here has right now?
Were there issues on the lot, was there an issue on the windows too, or no?
I think we need to
Be
ask the
discreet, yeah,
applicant,
okay.
probably, yeah.
Yeah, because when is the applicant? Yes, would you come up, if you don't mind, and identify yourself for the record, and explain, maybe just talk a little bit about the situation, and then we'll talk about the concerns from the letter and see if we can get
Sure.
everything sorted out.
Sure. My name is Kim Lemkow, and I live at 114 South Walnut Street. It's just across from where the farmer's market parking lot is, pretty much. And like Denise said, there's a room that is really part of the house. It's not a zoned a 2-unit, and it has its own entrance door. And it's just one room and a bathroom. And in regards to the door, I didn't know I had to get this permit when I started my other little retail store. I called the city initially a couple years ago and said, do I need a permit? And she said, no, you don't need a business permit. You just need signage permits. And I was like, okay. So I just assumed that applied to this. So I apologize for having started that. I've had about 25 guests there. And one time out of the approximately 25 guests over 2 months' time, one person called me on my phone and said, "Hey, I can't get out, I'm locked in here." And I talked her through, "Oh, it's an old lock, you have to push the little button up and then turn at the same time." She goes, "Okay," and she did it and she got out. Everything was fine. But now that this has been the second guest, which was the last person that came, when Denise told me to take down the site until we get the permit, I did, but there was some people scheduled, and I figured I'm just gonna have to, I don't know, I didn't take any more, but I didn't want to mess up their plans. I can give all that money to the village or penalty or whatever, but I just felt like it was wrong for me to cancel those guys. So I've had, since I took it down, I've had one more guest, and that person happened to be the one where the lock just, she couldn't do it. And I came in and I showed her how, and she couldn't do it. And then I showed her again. I'm like, "Look, see, like this." And I showed her 3 or 4 times. But obviously, it needs to be made so that anybody can get in and out of it. So we're looking at changing the lock. It's an older door, and the whole distance from the edge of the door to where the hole is not your standard distance. So I can't just go to Home Depot and get a lock. I have to get a specific one. So we'll fix that. Yeah. And then the window, that was the other question. I'm not aware of a window not opening. There's one in the bathroom that opens, and
Yeah, the concern that was
so-
raised in the letter,
Yeah.
and maybe they talked about it with you,
Yeah.
was that when they couldn't get the door open, and then they were, apparently tried to open a window, and the window was stuck shut, or
Yeah.
not able to open the window as well.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a window in the bathroom that opens and closes because sometimes I put an air conditioner in there in the summer. So maybe it got stuck with winter expanding and stuff, so I can definitely check that out.
Check
I
that.
don't know.
Which lights?
Yeah, well, when you mentioned that particular kind of lock, my parents have one
Yeah,
of those
it
on our
has like a little
farmhouse in
thing up
Iowa
and
with
down,
a little
yep.
button, and those can be
Yeah.
odd for people to use.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
so it sounds like you have a track record of successful people staying there, but on the other hand, I couldn't help but be concerned,
Right. Sure.
reading this letter.
Sure.
Not only for the village, but also for you as
Yeah.
a host. So, I mean, what I heard was, the door, the lock, the lighting, slippery. I mean, some of these are more significant concerns to me than others. But I would agree that before this is approved, we need to have some conditions so that, it would be terrifying to be feel trapped.
Oh, I
Even though
know.
you
and
could get,
I
you know,
acknowledged
that-
the guest on that point too.
Right,
I'm like,
it's the
this
sense
is
of
like
feeling
scary. She's like,
trapped, or
yes.
if there was a fire or something like that and they
Yeah.
couldn't get out. So,
Absolutely.
I personally believe that we need to have some conditions on this approval.
Yeah.
But is the door misshapen, or does the door
Nope,
fit
it's just a
properly?
150-year-old door with an old lock on it. And I'm wondering if it's slightly tilted and they need to have the hinges like with longer screws to have that addressed, because I've already been talking to my contractor about that.
Have you considered an entirely, like a new door? A new frame, a new door, a new lock?
There are 3 doors on my house, and they all match, and they're all 150-year-old doors with glass and irreplaceable. And if I had one separate door that was different, it would look terrible. And it's like a historical home. It was like Dr. Thomas's house. I
But,
don't know. Yeah.
has the contractor looked at it since the incident just
No,
described
I
in the
just
letter?
talked to him on the phone about it. Yeah.
And presumably, if the door is in good enough shape, well, the contractor is probably gonna be, I would assume, honest enough with you to tell you whether the door would need to be replaced or could be, whether just changing the lock or adjusting the hinges or how the hinges are attached to remediate the situation. I
Well,
would
yeah,
assume.
because he was saying maybe we could just tighten the hinges. I'm like, no, I want a whole new lock. I want a lock that is basically idiot-proof. So,
Yeah, that's what I would also be looking at, we're looking at the safety. I mean, you're running a business, so it's your
yeah.
business, so run your business properly for the safety standards of it. So I think, as Lisa said, bringing a conditional use into making sure the contractor is going to be looking at the door, at the locks, at the hinges, at the lighting, at the windows. I mean, if you've got the contractor there, just get everything all on the same page, so you're good, everybody's on the same page, and then it's good to go.
Yeah. Well, and if it helps, 25 other guests think it's great, had no complaints, no comments, no nothing. Wow, I really love your place. This was great. And I have lighting going up where it comes on as people walk up. There's 3 lights that come on, and then there's a light by the that comes on right by the lock. So,
Whether it's motion activated or?
and there's some that aren't, that just are on.
So, maybe we should just talk about conditions, right? I mean, I think someone should, a contractor should evaluate. I do hear what you're saying about it being a historic building, but if it's your business, you're making a choice to generate revenue from the business, and you need a door that is safe.
Sure.
So, I mean, I get what you're saying, not wanting to change your door, but if
Yeah.
it's necessary for safety, then I think as a condition, we need to have a safe door with a modern lock.
Agreed. And we're running a business, and I think that any business that's gonna be running has to go through certain hoops for safety-wise.
I wish I had a picture of the door.
So I think
But I
what we're looking for
Should
too is
be
that we're
one
gonna look
on.
for a contractor coming in, and I think Denise, you're probably gonna want a contract, you're gonna want something in writing from the contractor
Yeah.
at that point,
Yeah.
stating that everything is.
And then what would happen is, you can approve this with conditions, and then she will not get her permit until I get that letter from the contractor that says they sign off that it's safe.
Anything else you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, there is a picture of the door in the packet.
Yeah, no doubt, it's very attractive, but that's not the point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the selling points when I bought the house. And I don't know if parking, I'm a single mom, so that person screaming at my door and banging on it was kind of like my child was getting a little scared because they were hysterical, and I was trying to talk to the guests, not the guests who wasn't staying there. So, yeah, and then when I talked to the husband that had booked the room, he said, yeah, she's a piece of work, about the woman that was not the guest, but the guest of the guest. So she was a little hysterical just right out the gate, and I feel like she has embellished this letter a lot. The
And I
door's
think
not
honestly,
worked.
for us, it's, hearsay between two parties,
Yeah,
and really,
and-
we're just, we're more concerned about zeroing in on the safety of the door.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was, for me as
absolutely.
well,
I
reading the
agree.
letter,
I
was
want it to
on.
be safe too. I completely agree with everybody.
Yeah.
And, I was gonna tell you that and as far as parking, like in the front of the house even, when I moved into the house, it was my husband, my older son, and my younger son and I, so we had 3 vehicles. So now we're down to, my husband has moved out, and I'm using this room to make ends meet, and we have only 1 car now as a family there. So with a guest, it's 2 cars instead of the 3.
There was no problem with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yep, thank you
Okay.
very much.
So, would it be appropriate for me to then move that?
Well, we gotta have a
Oh,
public
public
hearing.
hearing, sorry.
So if anybody would like to speak about this, I'm gonna open the public hearing about the conditional use application. Hearing no comments, I will close the public hearing on the conditional use application, so now.
So now, I move that we approve with a condition that the door and the lock are evaluated, and that the results of that or any remediation is communicated to Denise.
Second that?
That was Frank?
Yes, Frank.
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion?
Good.
Okay. Would you call the roll, please?
Indeed. Krieger.
Yes?
Palata.
Yes.
Duda.
Yes. All right, we're all done with that. Okay, thank you very much.
So don't have anybody stay there until you get that fixed, and then, get something back from the contractor saying, he or she can send an email, just something that says it's safe and good to go, and then I can issue the permit.
Do they have to have the actual license? Because I use Brett Delaney on all my stuff, but I don't know that he has a contractor's
I don't think that, is that necessary? Just having a handyman.
I want to.
An actual locksmith. Okay. Okay, did you hear that? So if, yeah, like either Green County building regulations could maybe inspect, but probably better than that would just be getting a locksmith, because he said they're often certified. And then they can certify that it will open and close without any problem.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thanks, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so that's done with the public hearings then.
Yep.
Go on to, old business.
Okay.
Okay, review of the subdivision regulations with Choice One Engineering, right?
So, as you're aware, we've been discussing for some time our subdivision regulations. We've, in meeting council's goal of infill development, and what was even in there before, we've never required single-family dwellings to really have anything more than a plot plan. And if there's a lot in town, they can build on it. They just have to go at that point through Greene County building regulations. As we're doing more infill development, it's becoming a concern at staff level and also with the Public Works Department that we are using regulations that are outdated and really don't meet the needs of what we're trying to do here in Yellow Springs with this type of infill development. So I know we've talked about this before, and then staff went ahead and met with Choice One, and there's a representative here from Choice One who can review with us what they're suggesting go into those regulations. Now, that wouldn't be all of the regulations, but it would probably take out certain parts, especially as it relates to Greene County's subdivision regulations. We would instead have our own. So if you want to come up and just make a presentation and. Okay, well, and come up and talk to us a little, you know what the documents are, so maybe just gonna give an overview of those.
Please state your name.
Sure. Jacqueline Holskamp, I'm from Choice One Engineering, Sydney, Ohio's office. So essentially, we have two documents, one separate from, so any kind of proposed development of 800 square feet or less would follow a low-impact development guideline, and if they were 800 square feet or more, you would employ an engineer and go through the typical development standards that most municipalities have. So the biggest difference between what other cities, towns who have regulations is, for us, or for Yellow Springs, your current system is a little undersized. So whenever you have new development, our goal is to emit less cubic feet per second of water post-development to help compensate for that. So we're releasing less using the same formulas as other municipalities would, so there's no confusing, odd formulas that we're using, just releasing less so that, we're not inundating the systems that you have, if that makes sense. I'm trying to wrap up like an entire document that's very
and so the
wordy.
and so the rationale behind the 800 square feet or less is if you have an accessory structure such as a garage, that's the largest you can build. So anything over and above that, you had to go for a variance. If you're going for a variance, you want it that bad, then you're probably that would kick in. And I think that was talked at planning commission level earlier. So that if you are actually building a house, you're gonna have to have civil engineering drawings for the Greene County building regulations. So you would just go ahead and then get these stormwater calculations done by that
Yes,
civil
yes.
engineer as well.
Yes, just making them a little more strict so that we don't overwhelm the systems that are here without having to put a whole entire new system in. So I guess the biggest difference probably would be the low-impact developments allowing those homeowners to kind of basically decide what they want to do. So we give them some options. I assume you've received that document or have that?
Yes,
Okay.
with the,
So they can kind of go through there. There's really lots of different things they can do beyond this, but these are the basic ones you can really get some good research on and find lots of information online if they would do so. So these are things that we feel like the homeowner could take care of on their own, and then you can kind of see whether they've done it or not without doing a soil test or doing anything crazy, just saying, oh, they've planted 10 trees, or they put in a rain garden, etc. So that was the goal, something very easy and simple to understand for those with the 800 square feet or less.
So I have a question.
Sure.
There's runoff,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's increased volume going into our stormwater system. Two different, related, two different things. So and so the low-impact design, the purpose of that is to have more infiltration on the property.
Correct.
But what about then the regulations for over 800 feet? Are we just saying you just have to make sure it gets into our
no.
water system and so if it's too much, or is there low-impact design
That's where you would
criteria?
have a civil engineer create drawings for you. So anything over that 800 feet, or 800 square feet would be someone like a developer, someone putting in a large parking lot. They would have to have the correct calculations to follow the Greene County standards, and basically,
Yes. That's what you need to put.
yeah.
But is it still low-impact design?
That is more up to the developer themselves.
Because I guess I'm getting confused about what study is what study, but I would like to see more criteria about low-impact design put on other buildings too, so that the water, so we're having more permeability happening, more infiltration, and less water going into our stormwater system, which is better for our stormwater system. It's also better for the Little Miami River and
Well, the goal is with these
Either
standards
or,
is
yeah.
for that to
Yeah, and-
happen, because they're basically post-development, after they've developed compared to what there was there before, has to release, the rate of release is so low that it's like I don't know how to explain this without it. It's like a
Release.
5-year storm, like the amount of water that is coming down in a typical 5-year storm is so many inches. So that site, that new site has to contain all that, basically better than before they built the site. So it has to be slowed down, whether that's through infiltration ditches, or if they have some kind of retention pond, or rain gardens, or any number of things, so
Oh,
that
okay,
it's
so-
not getting into your system.
Okay, so, just so I'm clear, 'cause so let's say we're gonna build a 1,500 square foot house or something. It has to have a engineer design systems that don't just dump all the water into our storm system,
Correct.
but
Yeah.
keep the water
Yes.
in place up to the level of what it was if there wasn't a house there, or
Even
even
below that, yes.
even below that.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
got it.
Yes.
That's what this
Yeah,
ordinance says,
that's
right?
what, yeah.
Okay.
So what choice one did is they, for 800 square feet and less, is the booklet with the pictures, yeah.
I got that
So,
part. I
yeah,
just-
so when someone comes in and that's what they're building, that is something they will be given at the time they're given the permit. They then have to bring back, in order to get that permit approved with their plan, they have to also have a plan, a stormwater plan, as to what it is they're gonna do to mitigate that,
Which of
based
those
on those
options, right,
choices,
yeah.
based on those options. If they're building something larger than that, then that ordinance is gonna kick
Yeah.
in, and they're gonna have someone professional say what they're
that
gonna do.
same Sort of thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
now I understand. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So when you look at the subdivision regulations themselves, I mean, we still are going to continue to have the regulations in creating a subdivision and your lot size and that, this is just something that would be inserted to replace what's in there now that is outdated, and plus adding a
So like
lot more
Old
information.
sections that address
Yeah.
runoff and stormwater.
Can you even touch on that a little bit about the climate change and how this is a different?
Well, basically, as, you know, there's been these 100-year storms, which is so much rain and we get them all the time now. So all these regulations over the state of Ohio, United States, really haven't changed much. So instead of our firm saying, hey, let's change these numbers, we're going to use the old numbers that are still in place, but be stricter on it. Say, instead of, like, your average city used to just contain one-year storms, which were frequent, but now we're getting so much more than that. So we're saying, let's do a 5-year instead of the 1 year. So we're containing and trying to slow down a larger amount of water versus before, when you were just worried about these smaller storms that happened all the time, if that makes any sense at all. So we're not trying to have an engineer come in here and say, oh, these formulas are too different, we are not used to this, they're the same, we're just making it more strict. So, using different guidelines with the same formulas and.
Would you think that that's probably going to, I know that Greene County's looking at making some updates.
Yeah.
But they may very well start having a little stricter standard as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it would take a wholesale effort to change the numbers, the inches per hour, the technicalities of that. So I think rather than do that, I think communities will just start making them more strict versus following these 24-hour rainstorms or 1-year rainstorms.
And I think, Mary Ann, if you go near the end of the document, bottom, I don't see a page number, it's the second to last page, but there's a section that's called stormwater runoff policy. You see that?
Is it the ordinance?
Yeah, it's in the
Yeah,
ordinance.
okay, yeah, I have not seen
It's at the bottom of this page. See, Ryan, it says stormwater runoff, and
Okay.
that, I think, addresses
Yeah, okay.
what you were talking about. The design manual is based on the policy that land uses and developments which increase the runoff rate or volume shall be required to control the discharge rate of runoff prior to its release to offsite land. Yeah.
And, what I like about this is we're being much more proactive in this, in that right now, what we have in the code, like I said, allows you to build a single-family dwelling on any lot in town with a very simple, basically, here's my little house and here's my setbacks. And a one-line sentence in the zoning code that says you can't have your water run onto your neighbor's property. That's it. That's all it says. Whereas, it really becomes a problem after it's built, and then it goes on the neighbor's onto the neighbor's property. It becomes a problem not only for the village, but then it becomes an issue between the two neighbors. And I think this is just a way to try to alleviate that ahead of time, so you don't have any civil issues between two neighbors.
Yeah.
And so the language in this new ordinance, that will be inserted
Into the subdivision regulations, yes. And then
Somewhere.
we'll somehow be referenced, we're gonna have to reference it back to the zoning code. Yeah.
that all has yet to be figured out, or
Well, yeah, we've got a lot more work to
Right.
do on this, but yeah. But this was the main reason we were doing it. So we have, with this, having this, now we can go back and it's just a matter of looking at what we have, everything else that's in there, and then revamping it. Because the last time, the planning code had any type of a major overhaul was in the early 90s.
Lots changed since then.
Yes, and Greene County's is in the early 80s.
Yeah.
So, well, at least the part that relates to stormwater. Any questions?
any other questions? I don't, you were, are we done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Clear
you.
as mud.
when we were talking earlier, Denise, about how to proceed from this point, what do you think would be?
It would be nice if I could get maybe a couple of planning commission members that would, just, and I'd be willing to work too, that if could work with staff and just kind of do a review of the entire subdivision regulations to figure out what is it that we want to keep and then where do we want to add this?
Right.
And then I can also look to see where it might affect other codes in the codified ordinances. Most likely it'd just be in the zoning, but,
In the timeline for completing all the work?
I mean, we don't have a timeline per se, that as quickly as we can, the
Right.
better. Yeah, I mean, I would really like to get this done as
Yeah, I
soon,
mean,
as soon as we, you know,
yeah.
it'd be nice in the first quarter, or the second quarter of this year, we have it done, and it's in there.
I'd certainly be willing. I can
Two
help out
of
with
you
that.
maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great, and I'll touch base with you and we can set up a time.
Okay.
Okay, that would
So
be great.
I have a question, just since you're all here. So everyone seemed in agreement that this is a good thing to do, and it's gonna take a little while to get it implemented. So if in 2 months, there's a proposal for a construction project, can Planning Commission, when reviewing that project, say, well, imminently, we will be implementing these regulations, and we'd like to hold you to those standards? Can that happen? And if it were to happen, does it need a motion? Does it need a, how, because it could take 3 months, or it could take a year to get this done, but, you know, I'm just wondering, because have no doubt that we'll have applicants coming.
Can we pass the ordinance without, as a separate ordinance, without other changes to the subdivision, or does it have to really be?
Well, I think potentially we could do a repeal and replace of a specific section. We can make that an ordinance. It would be codified once the codifying process takes place, and it can be put into effect for individuals who are working on construction at that time. However, it just depends on how many changes we're gonna have, and implementing them, changing them, getting them approved from the planning commission. And it could take a process of a month or two. It just depends on how many changes there are. But it doesn't have to be a codified ordinance. We can make it an ordinance. It can take effect. It can be signed off on, but it wouldn't be codified just yet.
What would the distinction between ordinance and codified ordinance?
So
Yeah.
the codified is once the state takes it in, and we see like the American Legal Publishing, they will put it in and it'll be in a book.
Okay.
The public will be able to identify it and read it and see it. The only difference is we will know the changes to the law. Individuals who are using the construction ordinance and are under that will know the law, but the public won't have it at their access.
Okay.
But what I can do in the meantime is if there's a developer that would come in, I can just give them, which is what I do with other sections, letting them know, well, we've updated the fence permit or the sign permit, and I give them the new one because I know it doesn't come out for a year on American Legal.
And I guess that's part of what I was asking, is
Yeah.
if the ordinance can precede all of the other text amendments that will need to occur once you've kind of weeded through.
Yep.
And if that's the case, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do we want to, okay, so I don't really want to get into agenda planning yet, but we do have a pretty big meeting coming up next, so I think we should come with something. So we may not be coming with the actual amendment yet, but definitely by the meeting after, but we should at least keep this ball rolling.
Yeah.
And we can at least share with what we have looked at.
Then when do you think you'd want to you'd want to wait until you work with the guys
So,
before bringing it to?
so my thought is
Council.
we have a meeting where we can just focus on it. We come to the next meeting, which would be February. and review it. And then at that time, you would say, okay, we're in pretty much agreement, bring it back for the actual full text amendments. And it would be the March meeting where we would be able to pass it at the planning commission level. We can immediately bring it to the next, it would be the first meeting in April, where it would go to council. Yeah, and then they do a first and second reading. So they would pass it by the second meeting in April. It becomes officially law 30 days after that.
So it looks like you have a timeline
A
there.
little bit, yep. Move now. Yep, get it done now.
You okay with that?
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Next,
Thank you so much for all the work.
Yeah,
I know
thank
that
you.
you did a lot of work on that. I really appreciate it.
next we have sandwich board signs, right?
Yeah. So I don't know, if you have to, I don't know what the rule is for Dino. Is there a rule for Dino for just having discussion? Or does he need to let Lisa come back up?
That's a Jason
He's a
question,
downtown business owner with us.
Lisa
With a sandwich board.
Lisa can't sit in for Dino, but you're not having a public hearing.
No,
I mean,
we're just
so
having a
there's
discussion.
don't need to have a vote.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where the solicitor and I part our ways, because I think that probably we can make a case that you can sit here, there are many businesses, you're not this single impact, it's not. My advice would be probably you use this form of signage, I wouldn't participate in the discussion, and I would probably just say it's your call as to how you want to handle that kind of public perception, but it's not illegal for you to sit at the table. Would you?
You know, it's one of those situations where I think of Robert's rules and say, okay, let's do this pro forma. I think it can be done either way. Commission can make that decision. I don't think it's a public hearing setting, so we're okay, but
But because I feel he has valuable input, being a
Yes.
downtown
I mean,
business
I could
owner
be on
with a
that
sandwich
side.
board sign.
That's what I say, I could be on that side if you want me to. I could sit on that side and I could be.
And you could still
That
participate.
might be better.
Yeah, I mean, if that's it for, I'll go over that side and do it
Because
that
we want
way.
you to, we want to hear what you have to say
Yeah,
about it.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
that'll work.
All right, yeah, that works.
That makes sense, okay?
So does Lisa come back up or not? We're not,
No, because she can only be an alternate for Mary Ann.
oh, okay, right, all right. Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay.
All right.
So, staff has increasingly seen a lot of sandwich board signs in the downtown area. And sandwich board signs are not in the sign ordinance, sign code, which means pretty much that sandwich board signs are technically not allowed in the downtown area. And probably the reason most likely for that is because you're not allowed to have signs in the public right-of-way. But we also recognize that they're important to the downtown businesses and advertising what they have on their menu. And it's tends to usually be food and beverage establishments, not always, but often it is. We did a lot of, Raven, who works with me too, did some research as well, and came up with some different places, and I tried to incorporate as many of the possibilities for regulating a sandwich board sign. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that actually Dino does at his business is that he makes sure that the sandwich board sign is located in parallel with the actual stripe that's on the street. So that way you know that car, you're not blocking a car door that's opening. It's either going to be at the front bumper or the rear, somewhere in that location. We went around and took some photographs and actually some measurements. In the exhibit one, you're going to see we have trash can there, but there's also some planters, and that was a very small width of a property, so, luckily there wasn't any sandwich board signs there. Other locations, we've had people that were starting to actually put merchandise out, and we did let them know they could not do that. So you're gonna see, I did talk with Public Works Director, asking about some of the benches, and a lot of these benches are actually not village benches. These are been put out there by the business owners. So we want to have some sort of standard, either that it's, there's at least some sort of width for people to walk, or they can be parallel or in between where we have our either light poles or trees in that area. What I don't want to see is have one that's placed here and then the other one here, so then you have people that are actually going to have to navigate around the signs, even though there is the space there. I think we need to make some sort of decision on the actual placement of them. Dina, do you have anything to say about that? I mean, I think the way you do it is pretty good.
Yeah, so, Dino Pilata,
Thank you.
Dino's Cappuccinos. So we've had this sign for 15 years, and I went around today looking, so there's probably about 11 places that have signs. So we're there. What most of us have found is that if we're out past the building, and you've got the normal walkway, and you're in between where the tree paths are, where the tree spots are, it's easy to navigate. That was always my deal anyways, because I didn't want people walking around, because obviously if it's in front of my door, you're gonna walk around and you're just gonna walk around the business and not go into the business. So it only makes sense to pull it out as far as you can get it out to the street, to the curb. It makes sense that way. So like, I'm looking at a couple of them that are back and forth, so probably the uniform thing would be to get them out as far as you can get them out. Because I watch every day when people are walking, and you see, number one, they work. The signs work because everybody stops and they're looking, they're reading. So it's a good form that generates business for us. Secondly, though, if you're out far enough, they're stopping, they're looking, they can walk by it. You're not going to impede. That was the biggest thing that I always looked at too, is that I don't want to impede traffic. I don't want people walking around it. It just makes sense. It's just an obstruction, and I understand the safety features of it. Knock on wood, we've always watched. You don't see anybody walking into them, walking over them, tripping. Thank God. Those are all good things. But that's what I would look at is for the uniform side of it, is bringing them further out. I've always just I've always lined it up with the parking stripe, just because it was common sense, and it was right by my door anyway, so it all worked out. But it's easier. It's easy that way. The cars aren't, no one's going to hit it with their car doors. What you all said. It just is a smoother transition if we're going to go that route. Again, I've had mine up. It has been for 15 years, so we've been in good. Yeah, we've been all right with it.
And it really has just become something that I started noticing this past summer. It just seemed like they were just everywhere, and you would have to navigate around them. And it just, it is the village's public right of way, so it becomes a liability for the village. So it really boils down to, if we're gonna let them be there, then we should regulate them with some sort of standards.
And I assume as a business owner that having standard policy for them makes sense to you?
Yeah, it does make sense, because it's uniformity. I mean, uniformity-wise, plus it's a revenue, you're gonna get a found revenue out of it for the village. It's a one-timer, but anyways, you're gonna have found revenue. But yes, uniform would be better, because when you're looking down some of the roads and you just see in, out, they should all be out. It just makes a better flow for everybody, especially for for people walking the sidewalks.
So do you see this as something, as far as getting the word out, communicating this to the downtown business owners? Any suggestions?
I think it's pretty easy. I don't think this is gonna be, there shouldn't be any heartburn on the placement.
So I'm gonna
of this.
put that and make you sign in blood in that, right
No
there.
heartburn.
That it's we're not gonna get any blowback from.
Nobody in Yellow Springs will be upset.
Well, I looked at everybody that did it today when I was driving around. there's only a couple that aren't out, that most of them are out. You can, I mean, there was,
Yeah.
I mean, really, there's probably like 3 or 4 that were in on the building side, closer to the building. as opposed to
Did
being
you
out.
notice, most of the businesses take them in when they're
Oh, yeah.
not open?
Yeah.
And in the research, they all require, all businesses require, well, people don't want to get them stolen anyway.
That's
so
exactly it. I mean, it's
they're
just,
gonna take 'em in.
it's self-preservation. You know,
That makes sense.
I
I
can
mean,
take it. So it
taking-
comes in every night.
Removing them during snow emergencies. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common sense. I mean, I think it's pretty common sense what we're asking, and what you're getting from the business owners anyways.
So one of the things that I put on here was no more than one, we have multiple businesses in a very near area. So I didn't know if, no more than one within a 10-foot or a 20-foot area. Dina, have you thought about that standard a little bit?
I mean, I'm looking at the one that we're talking on probably Dayton Street, where they're close together, those two.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the good thing is that you've got the trees there, you've got the tree squares, that they could use the tree squares, that you could, you know, one goes on one tree square, the other one's on the other tree square. That should give us on opposite ends of, here's one square, here's a second square, you each get a square. And I think that's gonna give you your distance.
Okay.
In cases where there is actually private property, like I'm looking at Asanda,
Yeah.
they could have it if they wanted. If they didn't want to put it all the way out to
Right.
the
They could have
curb,
it in
they
that
could have it on
cobblestone
their
area.
They could put it in that grass
property,
area.
and
Yep.
that's not,
Yeah, exactly.
and King's Yard, I guess, that's all private
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, I think, you know, of the, I'm not sure how many, 12 possible, codes or regulations. The only one that I wrote, beside was number 4, the requiring a permit. Is that something that?
Oh,
other
yeah, we
municipalities
have
are-
to have the
Yeah?
permit, because it's a
Okay.
sign. And
Okay.
that, I mean, and that was what we realized is that they're not being regulated. So there's a sign permit,
Okay.
yeah. Now, what do you think about the minimum width, or maximum, I should have said maximum width of 3 feet? That has to do, I'm sorry. That has to do with, yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the sandwich board sign, may not exceed an overall width of 2 feet or 3 feet and a height of 3 feet or 4 feet. Dina, what is yours?
I think what I sent you, I was trying to look at that again. I think
No, I don't
we
remember.
were at 3.5, we were right between 3.5 and 4 feet. We were right in between there.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Is that something you get from like a
3x4.
restaurant supply
Signage,
store
yeah.
or something
Yep,
like that?
exactly.
So there's probably a lot of fairly standard.
Pretty standard, yeah.
Sizes for those. So that might be the thing to look at, is just, you know, look at signage on like a restaurant supply and see what
Yeah.
sort of the standards are.
And we do have in the code that all those signs cannot be placed in any right-of-way, alley, or other place except what can be permitted by the village manager or ODOT. So we can go ahead and do this. So if everyone's amenable to that,
Did
Yeah.
you mean to put a distance from, so if you said something like sandwich board signs can be placed no closer than 7 feet or whatever the width of that first sidewalk is to the, you know, facade of the building, which would then put that sign out in your tree, I don't know if you call it tree lawn, the area where the trees are? Am I missing it? I saw.
there's
how
different,
many
there's
per
conflicting ones
spacing
here.
and-
It's which choice you might want to have. You could just have where they have to be within so many feet of the door, or so many feet of a width of a walking path. I think what Dino is saying, the best one is just as closer to the curb that you can have.
Right, and what I'm seeing in your pictures, which is why I wondered that, is you've got either one sidewalk length the part where you said, you know, here's a very narrow one, where the trash cans are located on Dayton Street, and then it widens to a double sidewalk, and
Yeah.
so that if you say a minimum of X number of feet from the facade, you can't place one
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
single sidewalk area, but you can as soon as it widens.
Since you're here, can I ask you a question? So in front of Design Sleep, that's only like 7 feet wide. So in that case, that might be an area where we would probably say, yeah, wouldn't be able to do it if you have,
Or you do a single sign and just lay it up on the, again, I don't know that one, you put a single sided sign and you just lay it up on the building so people are walking by against the building and seeing it, so it's not out in that walkway.
So there's a minimum amount of sidewalk width
Right.
everywhere.
So if it's not an A-frame, it's not an A-frame that's gonna be out here. It's gonna be leaning up.
so you're not, that wouldn't be a wall sign then, that would,
I mean, it's temporary, because you're pulling it
because
in
it's
and out every day.
temporary?
Yeah.
Okay. So any suggestions on how much,
I think if it's got a tree lawn, or if it's got a tree box, the A-frame, you're okay. But I think if it's a, like Dina was saying, if you're gonna have it stand up against the building, you gotta be able to hook it to your building, because we don't want it slanted out to lean up against the
Okay.
building. So it's gotta be, you know, it can't be sticking out of the building no more than an inch or so, or you'll have somebody hit it.
okay.
But we try to maintain at least 5 foot of clear right of way.
That's what I was hoping you'd say. I wasn't sure what that was. And ADA's know what now, 5?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Just wondering if, in light of the leaning against a building or attached to a sandwich board, maybe, I wonder if we want to change the terminology. I don't know. To sound more inclusive.
For those that are up against the wall,
I don't know.
I mean, I'm just kind of explaining it as a.
Allow
Yeah.
one against the wall, an A-frame as well,
No.
or is it one sign per business?
So, you can have multiple signs on your business, but they're not these. You can have like a door sign, you can have a wall sign, you can have a projecting sign that comes out.
Then I don't think I would allow them to have a temporary one that they can bring in and out, if they can have permanent ones on their building.
If they what?
They can have permanent signs on their building, and.
But everybody
permanent
has that.
fasten it,
But everybody has
and I
that.
wouldn't allow the other ones.
Well, then that's eliminating everybody.
Wait, you're talking about the leaning
The
signs?
leaning signs, it's okay if they have a tree.
Oh,
tree
yeah.
box.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's why I kind of want to keep them in the same
Don't
category.
get a whole line of signs right
Yeah,
against
yeah,
the
yeah.
building that has 5 businesses,
Yeah,
and somebody's not going to
yeah. So, I mean,
come walking.
so it's one or the other. Either it's against the wall or it's not. I thought you meant like,
It's either attached to the wall,
Mm-hmm.
or it's
Or it's
an
out.
A-frame temporary sign out in the tree lawn area with a tree box.
But attached temporarily, so they take it down every night? Or you,
That's your choice, but it has to be attached to the wall. Because if we don't say it has to be attached, then they're gonna have feet 6, 8, 12 inches away from the wall, and you're getting into that 5-foot area.
we have I know when we opened up in '98, we had to go through, you had so much square footage of signage that you're allowed to put on your windows, on the building or on your windows, and you had to be that certain percentage. I mean, wouldn't that be applying here in the same way? If someone's laying up on the, if someone's attached to the wall, if they're
yeah,
attaching.
that's why I was wondering if it's basically we're following the wall sign regulations. I mean, it is, once you add it on there, it's a wall sign.
Right.
I mean, whether it's temporary or not. I'll figure out a way to write that into this part, but still refer back to what the wall sign regulations are.
Here's the only issue I have. I mean, you know, we're talking about this, and we may be opening up a can of worms that we're gonna get more signage coming. Not that I'm saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm just saying, I didn't know we had as many as we had when I went around today, so 10, 11 was more, you know, now what are we gonna get, 15, 20? then we've opened up a can of worms of saying, okay, well, everybody's gonna start hanging stuff and start doing this and going down this road.
Yeah. Well,
Just food for thought. Yeah, just food for thought.
yeah, I mean, we were kind of like advised not to open the can of worms, but it's just getting to be a clutter, and there's no standards.
Right.
If you don't necessarily open the can of worms, but just make a reference that any wall sign must be affixed to the structure, you're not saying, we're saying you can have more signs, you're simply specifying any wall sign's gotta be affixed to the structure. Then sandwich board signs are a separate matter,
Right.
because that's a separate type of sign.
Because I think that's where you can apply how much signage we have on on the front of the building then, right? Then you can go back to what the code is.
Yeah.
And if they're over the percentage if you're over your percentage of signage per the square footage of the building, then it's gotta come off, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
it's too bad, yeah. Thanks.
All right. So you're gonna continue to work on that?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll bring something back. We'll talk about it in agenda. Point. So the
Okay.
last thing, noise ordinance.
Come on back.
So I just wanted to give you a little bit of understanding of how noise complaints are typically handled. They usually go through the police department. There's someone's complaining of a noise disturbance, and the police department then goes and usually checks with the person and has them abate the noise somehow by turning down the loud music, put your dog inside. Those are usually the typical things that come up. But we have a noise ordinance that was added to the zoning code. I'm assuming it came in with the, actually it didn't. It wasn't part of the zoning code. It was added in 2006 into the general offenses code. And it's really specific in that it requires the police department or someone on staff to be a noise control administrator, and then it requires training of noise control officers. And when a particular issue came up this past August, September, when I tried to find that person, I couldn't find anybody that actually met those qualifications. And then, so then I started sending inquiries out to companies that were not located here. And I had one person that called back from, I believe it was Missouri, and she basically said that, yeah, the only place for training is out in Washington State. She is that person. She could come and abate this noise. Well, okay. It just was this, the standards are pretty crazy. And when we looked at other communities, they don't have all this stuff in there. I mean, they may have sound level checks, but they don't get into the requirements that you have to have a certified noise engineer and all this stuff. And we have a noise measuring device. We purchased a calibrator for that instrument. I feel that we should be able to have, one community actually had the police officer say their noise measurement was just based on their own hearing of it. Okay, we feel it's a disturbance. They don't get in, so, because I was afraid that maybe this was some sort of, state regulation, but it doesn't appear to be. So what I'd like to do is to really remove a lot of the restrictions that are in this noise ordinance, still keeping, we could still keep the decibel table for people to honor and for the police to be able to use as a way to document, but I don't think that we should have to have a specially trained person to do it. So, coupled with that, there's a section in the noise ordinance that talks about harboring birds that make a repetitive noise, and we're having an issue with that as well. We did, Raven actually did some research and I asked her just to look at Ohio communities, of how many communities actually ban roosters, and surprisingly, there weren't that many. What we typically tell people, we don't have any sort of regulation against roosters or chickens or goats or anything for that matter. What we do have is if they create a noise disturbance, or if there's noxious odors, then we have other sections within the codes, either the general offenses code or the zoning code, to try to abate that issue. But I'm wondering if that is something we might want to consider.
I remember when we were redoing the zoning code, we went around and around with that issue. And I think maybe even we're gonna do something. I mean, I remember looking at some different options, but I guess nothing ever got done, I guess.
That's interesting, I mean, because if you go to 634.05, number 3, owning, possessing, or harboring any animal or bird that frequently or for continued duration generates sounds that create a noise disturbance as defined in, presumably that refers to the decibel level. That would seem to include a rooster.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, it does. I mean,
Yeah.
and it refers you back to that table.
Right.
And so, I was looking at, in your memo to us, the second paragraph, when you were talking about the noise control administrator, as opposed to just having the decibel machine and having, for example, a police officer use a decibel machine. I would imagine there's some kind of training for the decibel machine that they could be, we've been trained how to use this equipment properly, because that might be an objection that somebody could make. Well, were they trained to use the equipment
I think
properly?
the only thing that we probably need to make sure, if we're even gonna have that in there, we don't even have to have it in there, but if we are gonna have it in there, then, that it's a calibrated, that we have evidence that it's a calibrated machine. And we did purchase a piece of equipment that is a certified calibrator. And, it's good for like a year to calibrate it, and then you have to then go send the calibrator back in to have it certified again for another year. So you could do that. Or you could just take that language out. I don't know. I mean, if there's anybody else that might have some thoughts on that.
What about, lawn mowing? Which
Yeah,
I
that's
think
covered in there.
frequently probably meets the decibel limit. Or like, for example, I have a power washer, which,
That's
or
covered
those
in
power
here.
equipment things.
Yeah, yard sounds from those types of machines
Weed
are
blowing.
exempt, but you have to,
For certain hours.
you can't like start mowing your yard lawn at 6 AM or something. It's like, there's a set time. I think it's like 7 in the morning, but on the weekends or Sunday, it's later.
Page 6 of 9.
Wow, it's pretty liberal. 7 AM to 10 AM, 10 PM. Oh, it's not, yeah,
About this.
okay.
Anybody in the audience have any comments or questions about sound?
Festivals downtown?
No, but, well,
Can I give you a comment on roosters while we're on roosters? Which is just that when I, on a number of occasions, have gone to clerk trainings, roosters come up as one of the biggest headaches in a municipality if they haven't already been banned, because they create incredible conflicts among neighbors, if they're not specifically that bird banned. And the couple of people who were dealing with those, Oxford notably, was having a huge rooster issue some time ago. And the clerk said, if you have the opportunity, just ban roosters. It eliminates the neighbor disputes, the calls for, between angry neighbors, and then the readings that you have to take it, but you gotta catch the rooster when it's crowing. And
Yeah.
that was the general clerk advice was roosters are a major pain if you don't get very specific about that particular animal. They also are a farm animal, and they do things like if there's one rooster and 15 hens, they're relatively calm. But you throw another rooster in there, and now they're in extreme competition, and they don't shut up. And folks tend to not really realize that when they go to Rural King and get a couple of nice-looking chicks. They're not farmers, they're not familiar with that whole reality. So just the general ban tends to alleviate the problem.
Have we had rooster complaints, Denise?
Yes. And I know that there's more than one rooster on this property, so it is causing that. And the thing is that when people do call about whether they can have that, I'm always very clear on the phone that yes, until there's a complaint. And at that point, when there's a complaint, then we're gonna be
So
calling you
if
back.
if we were to ban roosters, can they be grandfathered in? Or not?
Once they die, then they would,
I
then
think
they would
we
be
have
done, right?
a citizen who would have
Lisa
something to
Krieger, I live
say.
at 1109 Livermore, so I'm very close to the Antioch farm, where I hear the roosters, and they don't bother me. But I can understand how if it was a close residential neighborhood, perhaps it's different than if it's the Antioch farm, or there are a couple of other properties in the village that are larger acreage, that are more farm-like. And I realize anytime you start having a regulatory environment where you have all sorts of exceptions, that becomes a real challenge to enforce. But when I do think about a rooster ban, I do think about, like, what about Antioch Farm? Or other, larger properties where the noise abatement issue may not be so much, or where they really do have farm expertise and that sort of thing. Thank you.
And that's a good point. And, we could, if we did a rooster ban, we could ban it to residential districts, which would resolve that issue. That would,
Because, just in general for sound complaints, if the police get called, what do the police go and listen to? They go like to the property of the person who is making the complaint and
Yes.
see what the sound level is there?
yes,
And so,
yeah. No, they don't go on to the,
because
The person who-
roosters in a distance is one thing. Roosters 15 feet away in your neighbor's backyard outside your bedroom window, very different thing, yeah.
So residential would be probably would be a good condition
Yeah.
to put on it in the residential districts only.
and then that doesn't affect the, well, it wouldn't have, it doesn't affect the little island that's agricultural
Dan. Right,
within,
yeah.
yeah, wouldn't affect Dan, because he's an agricultural district.
Right, because he's a farm, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
he's got that farm there, and it wouldn't affect Antioch. And then getting back to the gentleman's question about festivals, I think that there is another provision in there about,
In the current,
in the noise ordinance, I'm trying to see, there's something about, there's exceptions for,
It's in 634.06.
exemptions.
so, for municipally sponsored or approved celebrations or events.
Okay, yeah.
G under.
So there, yeah, so there's an exemption on that, but I do think that, I mean, I wouldn't say that they don't exempt that, but they're supposed to, and at least the police are aware that there is that 10 PM. But I know that there have been times when that has gone over that time frame, and not only in the downtown area, but used to be out at the Antioch campus for the Booze Fest.
Didn't you give exemptions for that when they came to us? I think
I think
last year it happened too. I think it was last year that it happened. That we
I think-
went.
oh, they
Springs
went-
Fest, was it, we had one time.
Yeah, they-
Springs Fest asked to go late.
Yeah, did that go to council?
It did.
And I think they went beyond the time, too.
So if you want, I can come back with something.
Yeah, is it, you mentioned that there were, of the municipalities that specifically ban roosters, is it possible to find out what the language they use it for?
Well, yeah, there
banning
weren't
roosters?
very many. We were
Okay.
we were
Yeah.
surprised. I was surprised when she checked, I don't remember what she said, either 60 some different municipalities, because I wanted her to stick with Ohio, because I just want to make sure that it wasn't something else. And, yeah, there was not very many, like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And a lot of communities don't even, I don't think they even list them. I mean, as far as well, at least we have it in there about harboring birds.
Yeah.
A lot of communities don't even have that in there.
Did she check as to whether some other communities banned farm animals as a blanket ban?
I don't know.
Because that would have
she was-
covered roosters.
Yeah, but I know that I went to a workshop or something before and met with some people. There was a presenter from, it was west or south of Columbus, one of the communities there, and he was talking about banning, that they have a complete ban on all kinds of animals, and he was highly suggesting that other people do that as well. But that was also a ban on cats too, and that.
Oh,
kind of-
gosh.
Yeah. Like not a ban, not a full ban, but like you can have 2, I think, per household. That was just like, yeah.
That must be a
was-
joy to enforce.
2 dogs, 2 cats, right? Yeah, we don't want to have anything that we can't enforce, so, yeah.
Yeah, so are we,
Yeah, I'll come back with
okay.
something else, so.
okay. All right, so that gets us through old business and new business. We're now up to agenda planning.
Okay, so for the next meeting, we are going to have, it's going to be a pretty big meeting with conditional use hearing for Pocket Neighborhood Development. Home Inc. will be coming with their project on Xenia Avenue.
That's a conditional use.
That is a conditional use hearing. They submitted everything to me yesterday, and that could technically, if everything is in order, and they have done their stormwater plan, or we had Choice One look at their stormwater mitigation plan, and they approved that, that it could be approved in one meeting as a conditional use hearing. And that was the new Pocket Neighborhood Development Code that Planning Commission worked on for a year, and council approved and put it into the code in 2017 or early 18. We've only had one other Pocket Neighborhood Development approved so far, and they have yet to build, but you know, they have that extension, so we have that coming up. We're gonna have another conditional use hearing that night. The gentleman that owns the Indian food truck that burnt down is gonna be coming back. He had to follow the new regulations from the state on the fire code, and so he cannot place his trailer business in the same location as it was before, because it's too close to the building, the Corner Cone building. It's too close to the electric lines, and so he's met with our Public Works Director, and he met with the fire department, and they did agree on another location on that site, in that parking lot. And the new owner of the corner cone has agreed, yeah. And so he's coming I told him he would have to go through the conditional use process, though, because he's changing the location, and his, even his structure is different than it was before. So he'll be coming. So that brings me to some of this other stuff. I don't know if all of it will come. I'll put on there what I can.
Right.
And we'll see.
Did you put the parking minimums?
It's still under agenda planning. I haven't gotten to that yet.
I mean, are you the one that put that down there, or is that what, did I request
It's been
it?
floating around for a bit. I don't remember. Do you
I
remember?
just,
Judy,
Yeah, I think that was Mary Ann's
Yeah.
request.
when it does come up, I'd like to submit some articles that had led me to be thinking about it, of what other cities in the country and in Ohio have been doing in terms of sometimes just doing away with them.
Yeah.
Period. Or in some
The Over the
sections
Rhine
of the
district in
town.
Cincinnati did that. Instead, they're going with more, instead of having all this, all these empty lots that aren't parked in, they're going to have parking plans with, if you have a business that's open during the day, and this is a business open at night, they may have shared use plans and things like that. And then
So-
depending on how it goes with the comprehensive land use plan update, I know that Aaron Sorrell is gonna bring some suggestions based on suggestions by staff, Public Works Department as well, on how to do on-street, to increase our on-street parking.
Be the role of planning commission when Aaron has gotten his stuff together, does it come to planning commission first and then council, or how does that work? Judy is nodding her head.
My understanding is it goes through planning commission, is recommended from there to council.
Yeah.
So question Denise, how much needs to move, how much can happen in February? Because this is a lot.
Okay, neighborhood will probably take
The
up
first
some-
three are the only ones I want to commit to right now.
Oh, yeah, that
Yeah, I
seems
agree.
good.
Pocket neighborhood development, mobile vending, subdivision regulations.
Okay. Can I bring up the AJ issue?
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh, right.
AJ has to miss any Tuesday meeting of planning commission, January, February, March. At minimum, he's got another board he's on, they may have moved their meeting date, I don't know, he communicated that. So there is right now an ad going out in the Yellow Springs News seeking, what is it, 2 full-time and 1 alternate position on planning commission. We're looking at least a month to work through that cycle and get anyone moving into those positions if we're lucky. So we lose Lisa if we move to a Monday, we lose AJ if we move to a Tuesday. Do we want to just keep things as they are? I'm just kind of throwing the question back at you. Susan Stiles will be back next month, so it alleviates some of the issue.
She's has indicated she wants to be interviewed as well for
Correct.
her
Correct. Her
position
term's up,
was up
yes.
this month.
But there's also the caveat for both Planning Commission and BZA that one can serve until one's position is filled. In the event that she was not, asked to continue, she'd continue to serve until that slot was filled. So were she willing, that would not be a problem. I don't see that as an issue necessarily, just Susan's back in February, so.
Are Wednesdays an option just for the next 2 months or not?
I think isn't the economic sustainability on the second Wednesday? No, it's
economic sustainability was.
Arts and Culture Commission in is the second Wednesday, isn't it? And that's not the end of the world. We can find spaces, but when I put out the notice to try to move days, literally the only other day that everyone was
That's right.
okay with
that's
was
right.
Tuesday, so we did go through that process early on.
Well, I mean, could we, if it's only the AJ's, if it's only for a couple meetings, could we accommodate him and just go to Mondays for a month or two, or?
Well, and that's my issue. We lose Lisa if it goes back. if
What
it
about
goes to a Monday.
Wednesdays? Going to Wednesdays for,
Well, here's another wrench to throw at you. We have council retreat is tomorrow. We have a new council. The discussion about who's on what commissions all gets thrown into a cocktat all over again. So perhaps there's enough uncertainty that we can kind of wait for council to shake out a little bit. I can communicate to AJ whether this is a hard stop after March and he's clear after that point, and then I can communicate back to you whether we are really going to need to try to change it temporarily or
Okay,
what the deal is, because,
yeah, let's do
And
that.
just for planning purposes, the second Wednesday of February and March, I'll be out of town on business travel.
okay.
So we're going to leave it at Tuesday for now.
So the
and-
second, you'll be in for
Yeah.
this, you're here for the second Tuesday?
Yeah,
You are?
I can take a flight at crack of dawn. So come to a Tuesday.
So no big deal is what you're saying, basically.
I have 5 flights out of Florida.
Wow.
It's special.
Oh, dear, because this could be a long meeting. All right, so, yeah, that sounds good to me. Does that sound good?
So I'll be in touch. I mean,
Okay.
I'll communicate with you folks. It sounds like it's a little too soon to do anything. Okay.
All right, I think that gets us through everything. Ready to adjourn? I move that we adjourn.
I second that.
Second, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you. Okay. Well, thank you. You're very helpful, very, very helpful. Thank you.